Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it.
The call came late in the evening, just as I was finishing my cup of chamomile tea. I wasn't expecting it. After all, most job offers didn't come at midnight, but the voice on the other end was calm and professional. Ms. Lane, I'm Zion Brennan. I've been told you're one of the best nurses in the city, he began. His tone was polished, controlled, yet there was a faint edge, like someone who was used to being obeyed. I'd like to offer you a position to care for my father, Isaiah Brennan. He's been in a vegetative state for several months. The salary he offered made my breath catch in my throat. $5,000 a month, plus living arrangements at the Brennan mansion. That amount of money could change everything for me. I hesitated for only a moment. Why such a high salary for a comatose patient? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. There are certain expectations, Zion replied cryptically. The job requires round-the-clock care. You'll be living at the mansion. We need someone who can handle the responsibility. I knew the Brennan name, of course. Everyone did. Their wealth was legendary, their business empire sprawling, but something about this offer didn't sit right with me. Yet, the promise of financial stability was hard to ignore. When can you start? Zion pressed, his voice firm but polite. Tomorrow, I said, sealing my fate with that single word. The next day, I arrived at the Brennan mansion just after noon, my car tires crunching over the gravel driveway. The estate was even grander than I had imagined, towering gates, immaculate gardens, and a house that seemed more like a palace than a home. I paused at the entrance, taking a deep breath before ringing the doorbell. Zion opened the door himself, a tall figure with sharp features and perfectly styled hair. He wore a tailored suit, as if he were heading to a business meeting rather than greeting a new nurse. Ms. Lane, he said with a nod, stepping aside to let me in. I trust your journey was smooth. I forced a smile. It was, thank you. He led me through the mansion, his strides long and purposeful. The interior was as luxurious as I had imagined, polished marble floors, gilded mirrors, and chandeliers that seemed to drip with diamonds. My father's room is in the east wing, Zion explained as we passed through the grand foyer. You'll be staying in the guest suite next to his. It's important that you're close by in case of any emergencies. I understand, I replied, my nerves on edge. Zion paused at a large, oak door, his hand resting on the knob for just a second too long. He's been unresponsive for months, he said, his voice softer now, almost as if he were speaking to himself. But we still have hope. He opened the door, and I stepped into the room where my life was about to change forever. Isaiah Brennan lay motionless in a massive bed, surrounded by medical equipment. His face was gaunt, his skin pale, but there was something regal about him even in his stillness. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in the room. I glanced back at Zion, who was watching me carefully. I'll let you get settled, he said before turning on his heel and leaving me alone with my new patient. I stood there for a moment, listening to the rhythmic hum of the machines. The room felt heavy, as if it were weighed down by more than just Isaiah's condition. Something wasn't right. I could feel it in my gut, though I couldn't yet put my finger on what it was. I took a deep breath and began checking Isaiah's vitals, trying to shake the unease gnawing at me. Little did I know, this was only the beginning. It had been just 3 days since I moved into the Brennan mansion. The routine was uneventful. Monitor Isaiah's vitals, administer medications, and report back to Zion. Despite the grandeur of the house, a strange silence lingered in the hallways, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Late one evening, I sat by Isaiah's bedside, reviewing his charts. The steady beeping of the heart monitor filled the room, a rhythmic reassurance of his steady state. As always, I spoke to him softly, even though I knew he couldn't hear me. Your son must love you very much, I said, glancing at his still face. He's doing everything he can to make sure you're comfortable. Suddenly, A sound broke through the monotonous beeping, the sound of a throat clearing. I froze, my pen poised above the chart, unable to move. "Love," a raspy voice whispered. I gasped and looked up, my heart racing. Isaiah's eyes were open, half-lidded but focused, and his lips were moving. For a moment, I thought I was imagining things, but there it was again, that voice, hoarse and strained, yet unmistakably alive. "Love," he repeated, a bitter smile curling his lips. "Is that what he told you?" I stood, my legs trembling beneath me. "Mr. Brennan, you were awake." Isaiah chuckled softly, though it was more of a grim rasp. His fingers twitched slightly, as if he hadn't moved them in a long time. "Awake? I've been awake for months." My mind raced to make sense of the situation. "But the doctors said you've been in a vegetative state." Isaiah's eyes narrowed, and I saw a flicker of anger behind them. "Doctors say a lot of things when money is involved," he muttered, "but I've been listening. I know everything." I stepped closer, still in disbelief. "How is that possible? Why haven't you moved?" He finished the question for me. "Because if they knew I was awake, they'd kill me." I felt the floor shift beneath me. Who would kill you?" Isaiah's gaze hardened. "Zion, and his sister, Era. They're after my fortune. They've been waiting for me to die, but I won't give them the satisfaction." I stumbled back, pressing a hand to my mouth, trying to contain the surge of shock. Zion had seemed so concerned, so devoted, but now Isaiah's words twisted everything. "You're saying they're planning to?" "They've already started," he interrupted, his voice a harsh whisper. "They've tried to poison me, but I've held on. They don't know I'm still here, still watching." I shook my head, trying to process the revelation. This couldn't be real. Zion, who hired me, who seemed so intent on his father's care, was it all an act? Isaiah's voice grew weaker as he continued. "You're the only one who knows now. You have to help me. If they find out that I've woken up, they'll make sure I never do again." I swallowed hard, my pulse thudding in my ears. "What do you want me to do?" Isaiah's eyes bore into mine, a mixture of desperation and determination. "Keep pretending I'm comatose. They can't know. And when the time comes, we expose them." The days that followed Isaiah's awakening were tense. Every moment I spent in the mansion felt like a delicate dance, a balance between pretending everything was normal and keeping Isaiah's secret. I found myself hyper-aware of every glance from Zion and Era, their smiles now laced with suspicion in my mind. The house itself seemed darker, its opulence hiding something sinister beneath. I kept my distance from Zion, as Isaiah had instructed. Any casual conversation with him felt like walking through a minefield, but I couldn't avoid him forever. One evening, as I was preparing Isaiah's medications, Zion appeared in the doorway, his presence looming. "How's he doing today?" Zion's voice was calm, but something about the way his eyes scanned the room unsettled me. "Stable," I replied, my fingers tightening around the tray. "No changes." Zion nodded, stepping closer. "You're doing good work, Arabella. I knew I could trust you." I forced a smile, but his words made my skin crawl. I wasn't sure if it was the compliment or the weight behind his gaze. He lingered a moment longer, eyes flicking toward his father's still form on the bed, before he left the room, closing the door quietly behind him. Once I was sure I was alone, I turned to Isaiah. His eyes fluttered open again, a sign we had developed over the past few days to indicate when it was safe to speak. His voice was a soft rasp in the dim light. "They're planning something," he said, barely above a whisper. I knelt beside the bed, my heart pounding. "How do you know?" Isaiah stared at the door where Zion had stood. "He's getting impatient. He and Era can't wait much longer. I overheard them." The chill in his voice sent shivers down my spine. "What did they say?" "They think the time has come." They don't trust that I'll just die quietly anymore. They're preparing to take matters into their own hands. My throat tightened as his words sank in. What are they going to do? Isaiah paused, his face twisted in thought. I think they plan to inject something into my IV. Something lethal but undetectable. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. We need to stop them, but how? They're not going to wait forever. Isaiah's eyes locked onto mine with a fierce intensity. You need to catch them in the act. It's the only way. If they think I'm still unconscious, they'll make their move. The weight of his plan settled over me like a storm cloud. I couldn't believe I was standing on the precipice of something so dangerous, but I had come too far to turn back now. I'll do it, I whispered, my voice barely steady, but we have to be careful. Isaiah's fingers twitched slightly, a small, encouraging gesture. We will be. Just make sure they don't suspect anything, and when the time comes, be ready. I nodded, swallowing the lump of fear in my throat. The game was on, and I had to play my part perfectly, because one wrong move could mean Isaiah's life, and possibly my own. The following morning, the weight of Isaiah's plan hung heavily over me. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple uniform that would help me blend into the background, just another piece of the mansion's elaborate scenery. As I made my way to Isaiah's room, I rehearsed my role in my mind, calm, composed, and utterly unaware of the deadly game unfolding around me. I entered the room, the morning light casting soft shadows across the floor. Isaiah lay motionless, his eyes closed, the perfect picture of a man in a vegetative state. I approached the bed, placing the tray of breakfast and medications on the bedside table with deliberate care. "Good morning, Mr. Brennan," I said softly, my voice steady. "It's time for your medicine." There was no response, of course, and I continued with the routine we had established. As I administered the medications, I felt the air in the room shift slightly. A glance over my shoulder confirmed my suspicion. Era was standing in the doorway, watching me. Her presence was like a chill running down my spine. "How's father today?" she asked, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. I turned to face her, forcing a polite smile. "He's stable, as usual. No changes." Era stepped closer, her gaze lingering on her father for a moment before meeting mine. "You must find this job rather tedious, Arabella. Day in and day out, the same routine." I shook my head, keeping my expression neutral. "Not at all, Miss Brennan. It's my duty to care for him, and I take that responsibility very seriously." She studied me for a moment, her lips curling into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sure you do, but you know, sometimes I wonder if there's any point in all this. Keeping him alive, I mean." Her words sent a jolt of fear through me, but I managed to keep my composure. "Every life is valuable," I replied carefully, "and as long as Mr. Brennan is breathing, it's my job to ensure his comfort." Era's smile widened, but there was something unsettling in it. "You're very devoted. I hope that loyalty pays off for you." With that, she turned and left the room, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Isaiah's plan was becoming more dangerous by the minute. Era's words had confirmed what we both feared. They were ready to act, and soon. I moved to the window, glancing outside at the perfectly manicured gardens, trying to calm the rising tide of anxiety. The calm beauty outside was a stark contrast to the turmoil inside the mansion. I couldn't help but wonder how I had ended up in this position, playing a part in a plot that felt like something out of a crime novel. When I returned to Isaiah's bedside, I saw that his eyes were open, just barely, watching me. "They're getting closer," he whispered, his voice so low I had to lean in to hear him. "You need to be ready." "I am," I assured him, though my heart pounded in my chest. "But we need to be careful. Era was just here. She's suspicious." Isaiah's gaze hardened. "They won't wait much longer. We need to make our move soon." I nodded, the weight of his words settling over me. There was no turning back now. I had to play my part perfectly, not just for Isaiah's sake, but for my own. The stage was set, and the final act was about to begin. The air was thick with tension as the afternoon sun filtered through the heavy curtains. I stood by Isaiah's bedside, my pulse quickening with every second that passed. We both knew this was the day, the culmination of weeks of plotting, pretending, and fear. Zion and Era had been growing bolder in their visits, their whispered conversations and suspicious glances leaving no doubt that they were preparing to act. Isaiah's once tired eyes now gleamed with determination. "They'll come soon," he whispered, barely moving his lips. "Remember everything we discussed?" I nodded, my heart pounding. Every detail of our plan flashed in my mind. Stay calm. Stick to the routine. And when the moment came, act fast. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the IV drip, trying to ground myself in the familiar motions of nursing. Suddenly, footsteps echoed down the hallway. 2 sets, moving purposefully. My breath caught. They were coming. The door swung open, and Zion stepped in, followed by Era, both wearing expressions too composed, too rehearsed. Zion's hand rested inside his coat pocket, and I knew without seeing what was hidden there, a syringe filled with something lethal. My pulse quickened, but I kept my face impassive. "We're here to check on Father," Zion said smoothly, his gaze lingering on me for a moment too long. "Of course," I replied, my voice steady. I stepped aside, keeping my movements slow and deliberate, as though I was unaware of their true intentions. "He's stable, as always." Era moved closer to the bed, her eyes cold and calculating as she gazed down at Isaiah. "It's time, Zion," she murmured, so low I could barely catch it. She turned to me. "Why don't you take a break, Arabella? We can handle it from here." My heart raced, but I forced a smile. "I'll be just outside if you need me." I turned and walked toward the door, my fingers trembling as I reached for the handle. Just as I opened the door, I caught Zion's movement from the corner of my eye, his hand emerging from his coat, gripping the syringe. I froze. "Now." Isaiah's voice, suddenly strong, rang out across the room. In that instant, chaos erupted. Zion lunged toward Isaiah, the syringe poised in his hand, but I was faster. I rushed back to the bed, grabbing his arm and twisting it away, just as the bedroom door burst open, revealing 2 police officers. Their guns were drawn, and in a blur, they subdued Zion and Era, disarming them with swift precision. Era screamed in rage, her voice echoing through the room. "You'll regret this. You think you've won, but you're nothing." She spat, struggling as the officers cuffed her. Isaiah's voice cut through the commotion, firm and unshaken. "I've already won." As the dust settled and the police officers escorted Zion and Era out of the mansion, a heavy silence filled the room. The danger had passed, but the weight of what had just transpired lingered in the air. I sat beside Isaiah, trying to steady my breath, my heart still racing from the confrontation. Isaiah, his eyes now clear and full of life, slowly turned his head to look at me. For a moment, we said nothing, the gravity of what we had achieved sinking in. Then, with great effort, he reached for my hand. His touch was warm and surprisingly strong. "Arabella," he began, his voice low but steady, "I don't have enough words to thank you. You saved my life, not just today, but every day you stayed by my side, protecting me from my own children. I couldn't have done this without you." I blinked back tears, overcome with emotion. I was just doing what was right. I couldn't let them take everything from you. He gave a soft, almost tired laugh. "You've done far more than anyone could have asked. You risked your own safety for me, a man you barely knew. That kind of loyalty, that kind of courage, it's rare." He squeezed my hand gently, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I will make sure you're never in need again. You'll have everything you deserve, starting with a fresh start away from this madness. But more than anything, Arabella, You've given me hope again." I smiled through my tears, overwhelmed by his words. "Thank you, Isaiah. I'm just glad I could help." Isaiah's expression softened, and for the first time since I met him, there was peace in his gaze. "I owe you my life, Arabella. From this moment on, you'll never be alone." And in that moment, I knew, despite all the darkness we had faced, a new beginning awaited us both.